This is the Voyage Report podcast, where you get the scoop on travel. Now, the editor-in-chief of the Voyage Report, Mark Albert.
Greetings, fellow travelers, and welcome. Today, we're talking with the man behind a website with a truly devoted following. He is Cranky Flier of crankyflier.com, an airline industry blog. Brett Snyder joins us from Cranky World headquarters in Long Beach, California. Brett, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me on.
So first of all, I just have to get this out of the way. My curiosity is killing me. Where did the name Cranky Flier come from?
So it actually came from some friends, believe it or not. The blog, it started over 10 years ago now. And I had a group of friends that had known that I had all this random airline knowledge built up. And they said, someone might actually be interested in this. You should start writing it. And so I created the blog, and I couldn't figure out what to call it. And one of my friends who used to lovingly call me Cranky Pants said I should call it Cranky Flyer. And so I did.
So you do have an aviation background, right? Some of our listeners will remember America West. Is that how you got started in the business?
Yeah, so my interest has always been on the business side of the airlines. So I never wanted to be a pilot or anything like that. It was always an interest in the business. So the first thing I ever did was actually I was a travel agent when I was really young, in middle school, in fact.
In middle school?
Yeah.
You were a travel agent in middle school. How many people can say that?
I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that when this happened, it was a travel agency that had a school, and I told my parents I wanted to go because I saw a sign in the window. And we went in, and they said, well, I don't know if you can do this. And they gave me an OAG, which is the old thick book of airline schedules, and said, can you read this? And of course, I said, absolutely. I said, all right, well, if you want to take the class, you can do it. And by the end of the thing, they said, well, why don't you just stay on as an agent? But it was just an independent contractor thing. I would book my family and friends, and that was it. But that was kind of how I started way back in the day. My first airline job, though, was actually as an intern in college with US Air as a sales intern. And that lasted a semester. And then that's when I hooked up with America West. And I joined them one summer, and I kept interning with them. And then right after college, I went and worked there as a pricing analyst.
Oh, my gosh. So if I can just rewind slightly. So we're talking middle school. So we're, 12, 13 years old?
Yeah. Getting a ride in from my parents to the travel agency when I needed to book something.
Oh my gosh, they must have looked at you and were like, is this a airline savant or what's going on here? A little prodigy.
Well, certainly, at first the people at the agency just kind of laughed at it, but once I showed them I understood how this worked and could pick it up pretty easily, they were all on board. They loved it. In fact, the head of the agency ended up reaching out to Travel Age West, which is a magazine, and said, hey, we've got this young guy, and they wrote up a whole story on it, and he was loving it at that point.
Oh my gosh. And so it's kind of true to say that it's really in your blood. It's been with you since childhood. That's so impressive. Wow.
Oh yeah, no question. I used to force anytime anyone would go to the airport, and I grew up in Southern California, so anytime we'd go to LAX, I would always tag along, and I'd go and collect timetables as a little kid, and then I'd force my brother to plan trips, which, he really loved that. But yeah, it's been in my blood forever. And the thing that's interesting is that it's not in my family's blood. Usually you see a lot of people that, my parents worked in the industry and they did this, and I have none of that. It just came out of nowhere.
So now that you launched the website, and I want to kind of talk about the evolution of that website, but I just have to stick with this theme here. What did your parents say then, and what do they say now when they, it's been 20 years or something, and that you've stuck with it and you've made it into this great success? What do they think about it?
Oh, my parents have always been supportive of anything I've done, so that's never been an issue for me, and it's always been a good thing for me to have their backing on everything. But this website, when I started it was 2006 when it started, and I was still working at a full-time job then, but just started writing these things down, and it was a couple years later that I ended up getting laid off from that job. And I said, well, all right, got a little bit of money in severance, and so let's see if I can turn this into something that'll make me a living.
and you seem to have done all right for yourself. On crankyflier.com, there's a list of awards, listeners. Best Flight Blog 2011, 2010 Blog of the Year, TripBase Best Flight Blog 2009. I mean, the awards just keep going on and on. Are you proud of what it's become?
I'm proud of what it's become. The awards I don't really care that much about, honestly. The things that I care about are my ability to try and just educate people on how the industry works. And what I really value is that when I start getting media outlets that start reaching out to me for more information, because then I can explain this further, get a broader voice as well. And that's really one of the reasons I started this in the first place, is that, it's a time-honored tradition to hate airlines. And sometimes that's well-deserved, but other times it's not. And there's a lot of misinformation out there. And so the airlines, I don't think, historically have done a very good job of communicating how they work, why they work, all that kind of stuff. And so that's really the gap that I tried to fill back then, was, can I talk about what's going on in the industry, talk about it in English as opposed to in airline speak, and make it interesting to people who are wanting to know more about the industry from a independent source.
And it's curious what you just said about the airlines, because, we all sort of think of them as these marketing geniuses, right? I mean, they get us to pay these airfares that we think may go up or down or maybe overpriced or whatnot, and they're constantly launching sales and marketing and all of this stuff. And so we sort of think of them as pros at marketing. So it's interesting to hear you say that perhaps they haven't done a good enough job, because you're right. I mean, on social media, there was just a couple of days ago this viral video of the TSA screening and everything that comes with the airports, and I'm wondering if what you would suggest then for airlines and how they should be better at it.
Well, so a couple of things there, I guess. But first of all, it's funny that you call them marketing experts, because the way that the airlines have historically looked at it, of course, pricing is one of the P's, right? That is marketing. But historically, airlines have looked at pricing as a separate function from marketing. And so they've gotten really good in the pricing world, revenue management, doing all this kind of stuff, very advanced stuff that a lot of industries wish that they could do the same thing. A lot of consumers may not wish that, but certainly, the sophistication is impressive. But then when it comes to marketing, the airlines, I don't know, are very good at marketing. They're in a more traditional marketing sense, outside of the pricing piece. Historically, it was, here are our posters of amazing destinations, and that's how we wanted you to get there, right? That was way back in the day, these incredible artistic pieces that they used to put together. But now airlines have just confused the hell out of everyone. They've made their products incredibly difficult to understand. It's very hard for people to figure out, an apples to apples comparison of what they're getting between different airlines. And it's sort of become a jumbled mess for a lot of people. And I don't think the message is getting across very clearly to a lot of people anymore.
Well, that's one of the key complaints that we hear at VoyageReport.com is people just think travel and airlines are just too confusing, too frustrating. And some people just, throw up their hands and say, I'm not going to travel because I don't know where to even begin. It's just too frustrating. So what are the cranky tips that you would give airlines if you could about marketing? Do you have any suggestions for them?
Well, they need to start simplifying, because what they did over the last decade plus was they started going with this a la carte model, right? So they pulled out bag fees and meals and entertainment, whatever it may be. And now there are different charges for different things. You can pick and choose what you want. This has been a point of anger for a lot of people. But personally, I think the model is great. I think it's a smart model. But the problem is it's become so complex and so unbundled that people just don't really know what they're getting. So we're now seeing the airlines realize this, and they're trying to turn this into something that's easier to understand, and that's good. So if you look at an airline like JetBlue, for example, they didn't jump into the bag fee craze when everyone else did. Everyone else did it because they were desperate for cash and fuel was through the roof, and they did anything they could to raise money. JetBlue held off. So when JetBlue actually did it, it said, okay, we have 3 different fare families now. And we have the basic one, which is for people who don't really need anything. Then we have the next one, which is, includes a bag and et cetera. And so they've made it easier for people to go to JetBlue.com and say, okay, I want this. You don't have to pick and choose all the pieces. You can if you want, but they make it clear to you. It's pretty simple. What do you need? Pick one. And so I think the airlines need to move to that. Now, of course, the hard part is how do you compare between airlines when they're creating their own bundles that include different things? And that's the next big issue that needs to be tackled.
Right, the price comparison when everything may be slightly different, different flavors of a similar product. You have a feature on your website, the Cranky Flyer interview across the aisle. When you get the opportunity to interview someone like you did, United CEO Oscar Munoz, do you ever bring this up? I mean, do you ever sort of give them unsolicited advice? Hey, I think you could do better at your marketing.
Not really. I mean, I have those conversations with people outside of the interview environment, but when I'm doing an interview, I'm more interested in hearing what they have to say. I go back and forth because you can always editorialize in there and give people advice and say what your thoughts are. But in general, I'm more interested in just bringing their raw perspective from the interview. So, these are conversations I do have with people behind the scenes and, go back and forth with people plenty of times, but not really in that setting.
I'm curious what your readers respond to most. What is it on your website that you've really found has taken off and that the readers just eat up?
It's so funny because different people really like different things. It's totally different. So when I do travel, I always write up a trip report. And some people love those trip reports. Even a mundane trip, the last one I just posted was yesterday, a routine flight from Phoenix to Long Beach. But I get very detailed and I pay attention to little things and I write them up. And some people love that. Other people just get angry. They're like, why are you complaining all the time? I say, well, it'd be boring if I just said my flight was fine. I try and really dig in. So
you have to live up to your name, right? You have to be a little cranky.
That's right, to some extent. But the other thing, though, is a lot of people just really dig when I get into some of these deeper analyses and I break out the numbers and I start looking at different performance statistics and who's doing what, and they really like the charts and graphs. Other people like the interviews, so it really just depends. There's not one thing that I do that people universally love, except maybe my Alitalia Worst Airline Ever series.
There was another post, though, that I really I liked. You did one about, I think this was last year, wasn't it? You can correct me if I'm wrong, but about flying through 9 airports, listeners, in one day. And I think, wasn't it every airport that Southwest Airlines flew to in California at the time? Tell our listeners why you did it. There was a specific purpose other than it would make a great trip report, right?
Yeah, well, first of all, apologies to San Diego. They were left out. So
okay.
That was the one Southwest airport. Yeah. But so the idea was to try and do this without overlap. And so it was pretty ridiculous. So started home here in Long Beach and went to Oakland, then came to Ontario, went to Sacramento, came to Orange County, then San Jose, then Burbank, then San Francisco, and then LAX. So completely ridiculous. And this was all in one day. It was a combination of things. One was I wanted to celebrate 10 years on the blog and do something sort of ridiculous, so that qualified. But the other thing was Southwest had a targeted offer they were sending out to Californians that said if you fly 10 flights that touch California at least on one end in a 3-month period, then they'll give you a companion pass all the way through the end of this year. So it was over a year.
For free travel for a companion, yeah.
Yeah, for people who don't know, any ticket you have on Southwest could even be an award ticket. You can bring a companion for just for domestic flight, $5.60 tax, whatever it may be. So it's a phenomenal deal. And so I just did the math and I said, well, hell, I could knock this out for probably $400, and I should be able to make that up pretty easily by using the companion pass for my wife. So I did.
And you live streamed part of this, I think, right, when you would arrive?
I did. At each airport, I would make a point to go and live stream. I used Busker as the app that I used, and there are links to some of these, back on the post. This was last August I did this. And you can progressively see me just getting more and more tired as I go. And
Well, I think on the 8th or the ninth flight, you wrote that you are starting now to focus on your hamstrings. Isn't that the truth, right?
yeah, it was a lot of sitting. But it's funny because only one of the flights was over an hour. And that
Hmm.
was Sacramento to Orange County, which was just over an hour. So these were all really short flights and a lot of up and down, a lot of peanuts. And
Right.
it was somewhat surreal. But I think the first time it really hit me was uh, just due to the way the schedules worked. I was halfway through. It was about 4 o'clock already when I was halfway through. And I was thinking that on my flight into Orange County on that fourth flight, thinking, I'm not quite halfway through and I am exhausted already.
Wow.
And I had a couple of rebounds, had a couple of drinks, and was able to hang in there. But by the end, I was just wrecked.
Well, Brett, I have to tell you, when I read the post, what jumped out in my mind, other than your hamstrings and how tired you must be, is really a credit to airline operations, because that meant that if you had you were flying through 9 airports. I mean, Southwest, that schedule had to be operating like clockwork. I mean, you couldn't have an hour and a half delay, right? Or it would have wrecked the entire trip.
Well, here's the funny thing. Half my flights were delayed.
Oh,
They,
really?
they did not run a good operation,
Oh.
but they ran it in a way that it ended up working out anyway. So, um, there was one flight, the airplane was coming from Phoenix, and Phoenix had a bunch of thunderstorms. And this was the Sacramento flight down to Orange County. Well, I had something like an hour and a half in Orange County or something like that. And I want to say the flight was delayed about an hour. Uh, so that delay was okay. I got down. My next flight was okay. Everything was fine. But later is actually when things almost fell off the rails because my flight from San Jose to Burbank, the same airplane was going to turn around and take me up to San Francisco, but then it was a different airplane that was going to bring me from San Francisco to LA. And my flight from San Jose down, it actually got delayed, significantly delayed, and I was going to miss my connection. And I mean, I could make the flight in Burbank back to San Francisco because that was the
Hmm.
same plane, but I was going to then miss my last flight home and be
Mm.
stuck the night in San Francisco. So I was not happy about that, and I was thinking, well, worst case, I'll just get off in Burbank if I have to and go home. And then it turns out that another operational problem, that airplane that was supposed to come back from San Francisco, that ran into trouble, and they ended up having to delay that flight, and they actually almost canceled it. And no one at Southwest would tell me if they didn't cancel it because of me, because of what I was doing and the press they were getting. But
Right.
that wouldn't shock me. But they ended up using the same plane I took from Burbank up there. They turned the same one around back to LA,
Wow.
and that was delayed as well. So we actually had a bunch of delays. It just worked out okay in the end.
Well, right, and just for our listeners, I mean, the airline knew you were doing this. I mean, I think at every stop or close to every stop, they were giving you swag, and at the very end, there's this great photo of you being greeted there at LAX with it was a banner, and it was all a whole bunch of things. It was really impressive.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. So I did reach out to Southwest. I mean, of course, they would have known anyway because I wrote about it before I took the trip. I
Hmm.
wrote that I was doing it, so they would have known anyway. But I reached out and I said, guys, I want to do this. Do you think you could kind of keep an eye on the flights and try and keep them online? Which I wouldn't do that for a normal trip, of course, but for something like this, I just, wanted to see this happen. And so I said, can you look at this? And so they did. But then the funny thing is, they didn't really do anything at the corporate level. They just told all the people at the
Mm.
individual airports. They said, hey, this guy's coming through, by the way. And then the airports just started doing whatever they wanted to. And they
Wow.
got pretty carried away in the end. And I took a picture at the very end of all the swag I ended up with, and it was ridiculous. And I gave away most of it to I have every September we have a Dorkfest gathering at the In and Out by LAX where everyone just gets together and watches airplanes. Anyone is welcome who reads the blog. Just come on down. And so I brought a bunch of that and just gave it away to people.
So, Brett, you brought this up, so it's a perfect segue. One of your loyal followers, Ben in D.C., wanted us to ask you when the next Dorkfest will be. So just tell everybody, what is it exactly, and can you break news here on this podcast and tell us when it's going to be?
Well, so Dorkfest is a very simple concept. It is not organized. The idea is between 11 and 1, and I inevitably stay at least an hour beyond that, on one Saturday in September. People show up at the In-N-Out at LAX, which for those who don't know, it is right next to the runways, and you just have a spectacular view of these gigantic aircraft landing. And so for people who don't live near big airports, it is truly an amazing thing to watch. But we just sit there and eat burgers and watch airplanes and geek out, just talk shop. So that's it. There's no other organization to it. Here's my secret about this. I am a diehard UCLA football fan. So
oh my goodness! Wait! We have to stop the podcast. I went to USC.
Boo!
Oh my God,
Well,
listeners,
sorry,
can we
Trojans.
continue? Oh my goodness! All right, we're gonna continue anyway. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry, Trojan fans, but
yes.
I am a diehard Bruin football fan. So I pick my date depending on when they're not home. Every September. I think so. I'm actually working on something this September. There's another group which it's not confirmed yet, but there's another group that they also do a spotting thing, and I think they do a dinner or something like that. And so we're talking about doing it at the same time this year, so it could be an easy one-stop shop for people who want to do both. So I'm thinking it's going to be probably I'm going to say, what is it, the 22nd? Is that a Saturday?
That's a good question.
I don't remember, but I think that's what we're shooting for. But I usually announce it in June and put it up on the blog. But it really is one of those things, just come on by. There's nothing to it. It's just fun.
So in September, we've got Saturday the 23rd.
23rd. So I think it's the 23rd. But I need to confirm that, and then I need to talk to the other guys, make sure that we are going to still do a joint thing before I do anything.
So Ben in D.C., there you go. And just for listeners who may actually be flying into LAX for this, Brett, you must be just as disappointed as I. They've started to crack down on that. You used to be able to take that free rental shuttle over to that In-N-Out, which I love In-N-Out. I mean, I used to grow up in Los Angeles, and it's one of the things I hold dear. So you have to get a little creative, I suppose, to get off the airplane, get to In-N-Out, and then get back in time.
Well, first, I mean, you can walk it. It's not that bad, depending on which terminal you're in. But where it's actually even better is, I believe you can still take the shuttle. It's the parking spot. You just have to join their spot club, I think they call it, and it's free. But if you have the card, I think they still let you do it.
Oh, great. Well, there you go. Geez, that way I can fulfill my In-N-Out cravings every time I come back. So, Brett, why does snark, if I can call it that, why does that work for the travel niche?
Well, it's just my personality, I guess. But why does it work? I think it works because it sounds like you're telling the truth. It doesn't sound like some press release or something that's so carefully crafted and sculpted that you kind of lose that
authenticity.
Yeah. I think that's probably it. I don't know that you need snark for that, but it's just my personality, and I'm not trying to hide that. So I just let it come through and write. It's not quite how I speak, but I write in the way that I think, at least.
So how do you think then, as you've been writing this with your unique take on it for, 11 years, right? 11 years, I think.
Year,
yeah. Congratulations, by the way. How has travel changed in the 11 years that you've been chronicling all your exploits?
Well, gosh, I mean, if you look back at, this was 2006 when it started, this was, fuel had started to creep up, but this was before the dramatic downturn that we all know and hate, as demand plummeted, the housing crisis, fuel went through the roof, everything just went crazy. And so you saw things that were a bit different back then. I mean, it's really, the big changes started around September 11th. Before that, you had airlines that were making a ton of money on the dot-com boom in the late 90s. You had people saying, we're never going to lose money again. They were flying a lot of stupid stuff. They had a ton of capacity, and it really didn't make all that much sense. And before 9/11, things had started to fall off a cliff with the dot-com bust, and then 9/11 just accelerated that. And so all of a sudden, you had airlines that said, well, we need to get religion here. We need to start uh, restricting our capacity more, being more conservative. And then, of course, the biggest thing of all was the mergers, that you had people who started to realize that it was too fragmented, and airlines just kept competing away any of their profits, and it always ended poorly, always. And so, you look in since 2006, I mean, we've seen Northwest disappear, Continental disappear, U.S. Airways disappear, AirTran disappear, Virgin America disappearing, and other ones that have gone under, that have tried to do other things. So you've just seen a tremendous amount of consolidation. You see airlines being more conservative for the most part, and because of that, they've been able to invest their profits back into the experience, the onboard product, something that was neglected for so many years. And so I think you do see a healthier industry. Fares are still historically at a very low level. But things changed. The whole model has changed, where it used to be you just compared price and schedule, and that was it. Maybe if you were loyal to a certain airline, you would stick with them, but it was price and schedule. And now it's really changed beyond that as the airlines try to differentiate themselves and compete on other factors.
You talk about the health of airlines, and we just posted a couple of days ago a story on VoyageReport.com about airline employment. I think now the highest since before the Great Recession, which is obviously great news. I think it was the end of 2007, the U.S. DOT said, so certainly a good sign. Listeners, we're going to ask our cranky flyer here for tips for those of you who may not travel all that much, because you do find it maybe too intimidating or frustrating. But first, Brett, let me ask you, your readers are so incredibly loyal, and you have this section where they can ask cranky questions. And I wonder what the crankiest question, or some of the more memorable ones that have come through to you over the years.
I don't really get that many cranky questions. It's more people that just have questions about what's going on. They want to hear my take on something. And often they just want to hear my take so that they can go into the comments section and talk about it as well. That's one of my favorite things about the blog is I've actually, and I don't know how this happened, but I've created a site that has a really good functioning comment section where, you have minimal trolls and minimal spam, and it ends up being really good conversation. But the questions people ask me, I mean, the most recent one I got was someone that wanted to know my thoughts on this whole stupid United leggings thing where a past traveler couldn't fly because of it. The question wasn't stupid. The situation is stupid.
And expand on that. Stupid why. And so listeners, when he says a pass holder, so in other words, a non-revenue flyer, somebody who's related or an employee of the airline.
Yeah, it's either an employee, employee's family, could be a retiree, or it could be some airlines have buddy passes, which they give to people, which are discounted passes that friends can use to travel on the airline. It's all standby. And basically at United, there were a couple of past travelers that tried to get on wearing leggings, which is against their dress code for whatever reason for past travelers, and they denied them boarding. And that's perfectly fine, and this shouldn't have been an issue. It's ridiculous. But
so you think the media made too much out of it without the backstory?
Well, I think United screwed itself with this. So, you have, first of all, there were a couple of militant observers in the area that decided it was time to start jumping on United without even knowing what was happening. And so that went onto social media. But then United responded and said, we have the right to remove people, and pointed to its contract of carriage. And it was just an awful response.
Right, because they didn't mention that these were non-revenue passengers and that there could be a dress code. Instead, they didn't refer to that at all. So they were a little slow on the uptake there to get out the full story.
They probably didn't even know. My
Mm,
guess, because someone just mentioned something they saw at the airport, and United probably just has a canned response that comes back to things like that, so that it can get a response, so that it's quick. But quick is not always good, and
mm,
so because of that, it just took off like wildfire. When the reality is there is a policy, and you have to obey it as a past traveler. That's on you, and so nothing was wrong in this situation. But social media takes off quickly, and sometimes it gets way ahead of you.
right. You have a part of your business called Cranky Concierge. What is that? And can you give us some great war stories from that? I mean, there have to be some real doozies.
Oh yeah, there are always a million war stories on that. Sure. So uh, basically, what I learned, I had said back in 2008 when I got laid off from my full-time job, and I said I was going to try and make a go out of this. What I learned was that it was going to be really hard to make a good living as a blogger. So I started thinking of ways I could expand upon this. And what I ended up realizing is that people were looking for individualized help with a variety of different issues that were air travel related. And so I ended up creating Cranky Concierge, which is you come to us and you sign up for service, and we can do everything from helping you find flights and book them. If you're already booked, we can monitor your flights and then just help when things go wrong. We help with award travel, using your miles, all kinds of stuff, really anything air travel related. And so it's just someone to help you along the way. And we always send updates, keep you, apprised of any changes on your flights and things like that as you travel. So it's having that air travel guardian there. And so, sure, we've had all kinds of ridiculous stories. I mean, I think probably my favorite, even though they're dated now, my favorite was remember the Icelandic volcano that shut down air travel in Europe
Right,
for
right.
way too long.
That was
Um,
a couple years
you
ago.
know, yeah, it was several years ago, but it's still some of my favorites because it's so strange to have an entire continent shut down,
Hmm.
basically. And so that's where we had to get just insanely creative with some of the things we did. One of them that still stands out was someone who had some competition in, I want to say it was in Nice,
Hmm.
and their flights were all canceled, and they were coming from Los Angeles, and they said, "Look, I just need to get there. I don't care about the cost. Just find me a way to get there."
Wow.
And so we actually we put her on El Al from LA to Tel Aviv, and then connected back to Madrid. Madrid was still functioning. Spain was still okay down in the south. And then I want to say we put her on a train to Barcelona, and then I think she rented a car from there or something like that.
Wow.
But she got there.
Did she win the competition?
No, I don't think so. But it was all about participating,
Hmm.
apparently.
Not for lack of
Um,
effort.
Yeah, yeah. But anytime there's a big storm of some sort, um, the days leading up to the storm now are the craziest because the airlines have gotten much better at pre-canceling flights and knowing that things are going to be bad. And so the chaos now happens before, for the most part, because then it's just, okay, I'm supposed to travel on this day. The airline has pretty much canceled the whole day. So how can I get out of this? What can I do?
Hmm.
And so we help them with things like that. And sometimes it really just depends. I mean, this just happened a couple of weeks ago in New York. They were expecting a couple of feet of snow, and the
Right.
airlines canceled their whole days.
I think it was like
And so,
6,900 or 7,000 flights in a 72-hour period. It was something insane. Yeah.
yeah, and the pendulum has swung on this one, where they used to not cancel enough and say we can operate more. This time they could have operated more of the flights than they did, but that's just because they've learned that. Um, they'd rather be safe than sorry because you have things like the tarmac rule, which, you can't be delayed on an airplane for more than 3 hours, or the fines are outrageous through the roof. And so because of that, the airlines just cancel stuff when they probably could have flown more. So, during the storm, that's almost like that's a quiet period for us when we're in the middle of the storm. It's
Mm.
now the couple of days leading up that are crazy. And it's funny because we'll get as creative as people want to, and, a lot of times people just say, forget it. Just, I want to go a day early or I'm going to go a day later. Just get me a seat, whatever it might be. And then other times people say, I need to be there. Do absolutely everything in your power to get me there. I will pay whatever it takes. I do not care.
Wow.
And we just, those are the fun ones.
Sure.
But
Have you ever rented a helicopter or something for somebody?
have not rented a helicopter. We need
Okay.
to get that one on the list. I
Yeah.
mean, we've done buses, trains, cars, uh, any of that kind of stuff for sure. But not a helicopter. We need to work on that one.
And I know you don't like to disclose it, but listeners, there's the Cranky Yacht, which is also available for your booking whenever you might like it. So let's get into some tips here. So we'll stay with cancellations. So if I'm a traveler and I find out that, yeah, there's a storm coming, or maybe it's mechanical and my flight is canceled, what do you recommend for people? What is the first thing they should do when they find out their flight's canceled?
So if the flight is actually canceled, if it's a storm, you might just be worried that it might be canceled, but that's a different story. So if the flight is canceled, you really have a few different options that come to you immediately. The first is you can get a refund. If you don't need to take the trip, then don't deal with this insanity. Just walk away and know that you can get a full refund if your flight's canceled for that. But let's say you do need to take the trip. So then it just becomes a matter of how soon do you need to be there, and how much money are you willing to spend. So depending on the airline you're flying with, you're going to have different options. For example, if you are American, if American cancels a flight, they can put you on United, but they can't put you on Delta because the agreement between American and Delta ended. If you're on Southwest, Southwest can't put you on anyone. Spirit won't put you on anyone, some of the low cost guys. So it really just depends. So what you want to do as a passenger is, if you're at the airport, get in line. Can't hurt. Just, talk to someone, get in line. But while you're there, get on the phone. Call up reservations. They can help you just the same. And try and get to a person who can help you as quickly as you can. If you book their travel agent, your travel agent can help with that as well, which, with Cranky Concierge, we do that all the time. We'll see a problem coming, and we can just put a new flight in the reservation right there, and handle it that way. So it just depends kind of who you've booked through and how you do it. But find a person who can help you.
And that's
And
one of
then the
my.
other thing you can...
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that's one of my favorite tips is that if you're sitting on an airplane and you know that you're not going to make your connection because it's been canceled, or maybe you're at the airport and your flight is canceled. I love that tip of if you have to get in line, there's 150 people on your flight. Be on the phone at the same time. I mean, whether you're on hold in line or not, I mean, somebody may help you before you ever get to that counter. So that's a great tip to have.
Yeah, and listen, while you're there, while you're on hold and while you're doing that, log on. Use your phone, use an iPad, laptop, whatever it is. Airlines have pretty crude tools that can help online to rebook you on another flight. It can be on the app sometimes. If there's another flight an hour later and there's room on it, those tools work great. So try those, because that might solve your problem as well. But get in line first. Don't waste time here. And so try that avenue as well. Then if that doesn't work, and if it's one of those days where there's just nothing going on and you're just out of luck, then this is where you should try and start getting creative yourself if you can. And this is where we really like doing this stuff at Cranky Concierge, is try and find options yourself that are available. Now, you may not be able to put you on that option. You may need the airline to help you. But if you get to the front and you're dealing with an agent who has dealt with person after person who has no option and is looking for something, and the agent can't help them, and they're exhausted and tired and doing everything they can. If you get up there and say, "Hey, I found an option that I think would work. Would you be able to do this?" For the most part, that's going to be well received, because you're trying to help them do their jobs, and you both want the same thing. You and the agent both want you not to be there. They want to move on and get to the next person and do their jobs. So if you can come up with options to help them, then that's great. And be nice. Please be nice to everyone. It's the worst. You see people yelling at a gauge, and it's not their fault, and they're not going to really try hard to help you if you're screaming at them.
Well, and some of these travel apps today, there's a very simple option when you look at your flight, and it will give you alternative flights. So just as you mentioned, if you're in line and you're waiting, be proactive, come up with an alternative. Sometimes it's very easy to find, oh, okay, well, there's this flight, or I can connect through here instead, or go on this one a little bit later, and at least have options at your fingertips so that you're not completely surrendering to fate and everything else. So what about?
That's right.
So what are your tips then for people who may just find travel too intimidating, too expensive, too frustrating, inaccessible, and so they don't go anywhere? What would you say to those people how they should approach travel today?
Well, yeah. I mean, the expensive thing, there are a lot of great deals out there, but of course, everyone has to stick within their own budget. So, that I can't help with that one so much. But, if budget is a huge issue, but you really want to travel, then there are ways to get places for cheaper. Look at the ultra low cost carriers that are out there. There's an airline that just launched called Level, which was launched by the heads of or the airline company that runs British Airways and Iberia, among others. They just launched. They're starting LA and Oakland to Barcelona. Really cheap fares to start, right? So if you don't care about all the frills, but budget is important, there are a bunch of these options, and there are only going to be more that are coming. Norwegian is a good option over the Atlantic. And then even, within the U.S., you have guys like Frontier, Spirit, Allegiant that are these ultra low-cost carriers. Fares are relatively cheap. They really are. You just need to know what you want to have included or what you need to have included and make sure you can afford all that. So, that's from a budget perspective, that's the way to look at it. Now, in general, that the hassle perspective, that's different. I mean, I'd say in general, it's worth it. Not necessarily to go on a trip every week, but don't turn down that one big summer trip just because you think it's going to be a hassle. And the best thing you can do to help alleviate the potential hassle is just give yourself time. Throughout all phases of the trip, give yourself time. So arrive at the airport really early. Are you going to spend a lot of time waiting around doing nothing? Probably. But on the rare day when the security line is 2 hours long, you're not going to have to worry about it. When you schedule connections, schedule a longer connection. Does it mean it's going to take you longer to get somewhere? Yeah, sure. But then you don't have to worry about it. So the people who are really focused on this hassle concern, just give yourself time in all different phases.
A cushion.
A cushion, because then you'll have the ability to recover from any issues that may arise.
And listeners, about the budget piece, we have a whole video on voyagereport.com about how you can find international airfare for under $500, how we find it, how we book it, and how you can have a more enjoyable experience because you're saving money, and that's on voyagereport.com. Just click on courses. Brett, finally, what do you tell your friends and your family about what you do? How do you describe what you do? Do you say you're a travel writer, you're a cranky flyer? How do you describe it to the people you know the best?
It's a good question. The very quick answer is I say I write about the airline industry and I have an air travel assistance business. And that is never something that it fails to get follow-up questions. What does that mean? The concierge business is a huge piece of it. It's become much bigger. We've got a dozen people in the company. We've got just growing fast on that. So, a couple of times I've thought about, well, should I start saying I do that first? But I love the writing piece of it, and I, just continue to do that, and the two fit together very well. So I always say that I do both things. But that's the brief elevator pitch there of what I do, I guess.
Brett Snyder is the Cranky Flyer, joining us from Cranky World headquarters in Long Beach, California. Brett, thank you so much. Even though you're a UCLA Bruins fan, we still appreciate you joining us here.
You're welcome, and go Bruins.
Oh, geez. Listeners, are you a cranky flyer? And what are your favorite posts or stories about Brett and his website? Let us know by rating this podcast, leaving us a review, and sharing it on social media. We have guests every week talking about travel news and trends, so be sure to subscribe to our podcast. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Mark Albert. Bon voyage.
You've been listening to the Voyage Report podcast. Get the scoop on travel at voyagereport.com.